Good evening, everybody. Sorry,
has Andrew given apologies, Sandra?
Yes, Councillor.
Okay.
Okay. So if people could put themselves in mute mode, apart from when they, obviously need to speak, that would be great. I haven't got the blurb in front of me, but obviously this is going to be recorded. So if we can just sort of follow protocol of, putting our hands up when we want to speak. Obviously, I think there's the chat boxes as well if you want to speak and you haven't been seen on the chat boxes and stuff, on the sort of video, on the video link. Okay, so if we start with part one, sort of apologies for absence, and the apologies for absence you've said already, Mark, yes?
Yeah, we've got Councillor Andrew Parker and also Mr. Anthony Raybould as well from the tenant group.
Okay, thank you.
I think Councillor Brooks put her hand up.
Oh, hello.
Hello, Chair. Just say I am waiting for a fairly urgent phone call. So when it does come, I'm going to have to go. So I'll just leave. So if you wonder why I just disappear, that's where I'll be going. Should be about 7 o'clock. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you.
So if we move on to Councillor Christine Cave. Did you want to speak, Christine? Oh, I can't hear you at the moment.
I think you're on mute, possibly, Councillor. You're on mute at the moment, Councillor. So I'll try and press on my side. I'll try pressing again. Right, I've turned off on our end, so hopefully.
Oh, unfortunately, we still can't hear you, Councillor Cave. I don't know whether.
Would you be able to put some in the chat, Councillor, or put it in the chat? Probably best, as long as you can hear it.
Okay, thank you. We'll try and pick it up there. So minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of October 2020. Anybody have any sort of comments that they want to make about that, or are we happy to take them as read? Oh, okay. So everyone's saying yes. Is everybody saying yes? They're happy to take the minutes as read? Okay, thank you very much. And then if we've got any declarations of interests from anybody today? No? Okay, if we can then move on to agenda item 4, which is for reference to us from Cabinet.
Sorry, Claire, can I just interrupt?
Yes.
I was just wondering, Paula Barnett for YOS, she's got something else on tonight as well. She's wondering if she could do her report first, because obviously the rest of the reports are Mike and his officers, if that was possible. If yourself and the committee were happy to do that and move that up to the first report on the agenda.
The rest of the committee happy to do that? I'm happy to do that, yes. So if Paula, if you would like to go first, that'd be lovely. So that's agenda item 7 for everybody. If you look at where agenda item 7 starts, Youth Offending Service Transition and Recovery Plan, dated 8th of September 2020. Paula, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate that. As commented, this is the Transition and Recovery Plan for the Youth Offending Service dated the 8th of September. The purpose of this report is to inform committee about the plans for transition and recovery as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The report brings to the attention the Youth Offending Services, as I said, Transition and Recovery Plan. It's designed, the Youth Offending Services are a designated public service, so we have to continue to deliver services during the pandemic. And this report really is for a recommendation that the committee notes the contents to enable you to have effective oversight of the work of the Youth Offending Service. It also helps you to understand how we are delivering our services during the pandemic. As you'll be aware, committee is aware that the membership of the youth offending team is designated by legislation. The purpose of the youth offending team is to provide relevant youth justice services across the local authority area to the extent that they're required. We have a duty under Section 40 of the Crime and Disorder Act to produce an annual youth justice plan, which normally comes to the committee around about this time. But you'll note that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the requirement to produce the youth justice plan has been put on hold by the Youth Justice Board, and they've asked us to produce a number of documents instead. The first one being a business continuity plan, which had to be submitted by the 30th of April and was updated in June 2020. This recovery plan was required to be submitted by the 4th of September, but we asked for an extension until the 8th of September when the YOS Management Board were meeting to agree it. And we had to provide a position statement on the Youth Justice National Standards by the 30th of April. The Youth Justice Board provided guidance to youth offending teams on how they should produce their recovery plans, which suggested we provide an overview of the impact of COVID based on our local circumstances, that we look at how the YOS will transition to recovery based on the young person's journey, underpinned by the outcomes outlined in national standards for youth justice. The recovery plan sets out the Vale of Glamorgan Council position, and therefore the YOS position, which is where you can work from home, you should work from home. So it's important to note as we go through the plan that we're not operating business as usual. It's not my intention to go through the entire plan, you'll be delighted to hear, but I want to just highlight some key points. The first section of the recovery plan sets out the governance arrangements, the operating model and how the YOS is using its resources to support and intervene with children and families and victims. We are carrying out the majority of our duties remotely, unless we identify a need or risk to undertake face-to-face contact with children and young people. And what we're doing is completing a COVID-19 risk assessment to look at the necessity of that. The document also highlights how the services are being delivered across all 5 of the Youth Justice National Standards. And inside the document, we look at 3 distinct sections, which are the needs of the child, needs of staff delivering the service, and how strategic partnership arrangements are supporting the delivery of services. What has become apparent when we were completing the plan is the need for effective partnership working arrangements to continue. It's difficult to provide quality services and positive outcomes unless we are working alongside partners, as they need to take the lead in specific service areas to take forward the actions identified within the plan. The recommendations and actions identified across each of the Youth Justice National Standards areas are outlined as followed. You'll notice within the document there's a section entitled Appropriate Adult Duties, and the recommendations and actions in relation to that are outlined on page 9. Out of court disposals, which is down as OCD, which you probably didn't understand what that meant. The recommendations and actions are outlined on page 14 and 15. There's a national standard in relation to attendance at court. The recommendations and actions outlined are on page 19 and 20. In the community is for those children who are subject to statutory court orders, and the recommendations and actions related to this are on page 25. Insecure is about children who are held in secure establishments, and the recommendations and actions outlined are on page 27. Transitions is about when children move from one service to another or one setting to another, and the recommendations and actions on this are outlined on page 29. The YOS Management Board, as I said, met on the 8th of September and agreed the plan, and are now looking to develop an action plan to take forward the agreed recommendations. The proposals outlined fit with the Council's 5 ways of working, in that we are meeting Wellbeing Objective 1, specifically Objective 2, providing decent homes and safe communities, and focusing on specifically children and tackling inequalities linked to deprivation. The YOS forms part of the Council's local authorities prevention and early intervention services, and we're working closely with Flying Start, Families First and others to ensure children receive, hopefully, the right services at the right time to address their identified needs. Is there any questions you want to ask on the report?
Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Paula about the report? Councillor Hanks.
Paula, I was just wondering, I did read this team consists, when fully staffed, of 6 practitioners. Are we fully staffed at the moment?
The team, there's teams within a team, if that makes sense, Councillor Hanks. We are roughly about 30 practitioners in total. And the team that refers to 6 practitioners is in relation to the case management team, who provide a service to the court and manage statutory cases. That team is now fully staffed at the moment.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Paula? No. I had a sort of a question. I just wondered, with the sort of the court proceedings, what is the actual waiting time now that they have to wait if they are, you know, due to go have a court case and things like that? If you could tell me that, please.
I can only give you a rough estimation. Initially, when the pandemic started, the court actually adjourned all court cases and put them back until about May. The court has restarted sitting on a weekly basis for children and young people now from June. So they've cleared the backlog and they will tell you that they're listing cases as and when they arise. So what we're finding at the moment is the court is listing cases. They can list between Tuesday and a Thursday. And they're putting them on a staggered time slot basis. They're trying to avoid too many people being in the court arena at the same time. So we're finding, if, for example, we asked to breach a young person because they were not complying, it could take between 10 and 15 days to list a court case, but it's not longer than that.
Okay, thank you, Paula. So are we happy to note this report, and we'll wait for the, we'll have sight of the action plan that's when that's developed? Is that the case, Paula?
If you would like to have a sight of it,
Yes.
it's monitored by the management board, but I'm happy for you to review it if you wish to.
It might. I think it might be useful for us to see. We see this document at a later stage, perhaps to see what the action plan is. Is everyone else happy for that and to note this report? Thank you very much, Paula. That was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Are you happy for me to leave, or?
Yes. If
Thank you.
everyone else is happy for Paula to leave, yes, we're happy. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. So if we can move to agenda item 4, which I think, Mike Ingram, you're going to present the local housing market assessment for 2019 that went to Cabinet 19th of October. Thank you, Mike.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you mentioned, this went to Cabinet on the 19th of October, and Cabinet resolved that the housing market assessment to 2019 be accepted, policy implications be noted, subject to any comments from Home and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee, with a second resolution that the LHMA be referred to the Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee for consideration. Just in terms of background, the local authority is required from time to time to consider its local housing needs under the 1985 Housing Act, Section 8. We're also required in terms of statutory and legislative direction under Planning Policy Wales, and also by various TAN technical advice notes. And TAN 2 provides guidance on the role that planning system plays in delivering affordable housing, and requires us to undertake a local housing market assessment. The local housing market assessment is a biannual assessment, and it follows specific guidance which is set down by Welsh Government to ensure consistency across Wales. Every other local authority is required to progress a local housing market assessment using the same criterion. We had initially hoped, obviously, for the local housing market assessment to have been presented to Cabinet at an earlier date, but obviously circumstances being as they were, this was the first opportunity that we had to take the report to Cabinet. In terms of the report itself, for those members who have previously seen the local housing market assessment, this follows on for our early assessment in 2017. We undertake the assessment in-house following the guidance that I've mentioned, and effectively it's an overview of the housing market in the Vale of Glamorgan at ward level or by major settlement level. And it follows a methodology which allows us to assess the market across all tenures, whether that be home ownership, private renting, or affordable housing. A full copy of the document, which is attached to your papers, has also been provided previously for members to review. The fundamental aspect for us of the local housing market assessment is the actual calculation of the net need for affordable housing. So there are estimates of shortfalls of surpluses across the various areas. And that's obviously crucial, not only for the housing department in terms of our aspirations and our reason for developing further additional council housing, but it's clearly also important for colleagues in planning when it comes to considering Section 106 agreements and supplementary planning guidance that is provided as well. Historically, we've only considered the need for social rented accommodation. However, in the last few years, clearly we're now understanding that it's not only those that require social housing that require some form of subsidy or assistance in order to access good quality housing. We also now know that there are financial difficulties in other areas of the market, and therefore there are other products that we assess as well. And what I mean by products are things like intermediate rented products, which is effectively a subsidy on a market rent to enable those people who wish to rent to be able to enter that market, but also other areas such as low-cost home ownership, which members will previously been aware of. Looking at the report in front of you, I suppose in terms of the highlight, the figure is referencing table 2.8 of the report, which is a table which shows the calculation that we have to work towards. And as you can see from that table, what the report is identifying, certainly in relation to affordable housing, is and the breakdown for those tenure types that I've just mentioned. What we have is an increase from 2017 of an additional 320 units of affordable housing, and we've now identified an annual requirement in order to meet our affordable housing need of, as you can see from the table, 799 units of social housing, together then with 21 units of low cost home ownership and 70 units of intermediate rented accommodation. There is a footnote to that table, and as far as the 799 is concerned, 489 units as a result of turnover of our existing stock, which were required to count under the methodology. So those 489 units would be what we would anticipate across the Vale of Glamorgan, a normal annual turnover of stock. So under 2.9, it clarifies that point that I've just made. There is a net annual requirement of 890 affordable units in the Vale of Glamorgan during the next 5-year period between 2019 and 2020, which equates to 4,450 over that full period. The report goes on to say that there are a number of factors which have impacted on that increase, none more so than the increase of numbers of applicants that we currently have on the Homes For You register. So as of 2019, when the report and the information was tabled, there were 5,986 people registered under Homes For You, which was an increase from 3,882 in 2017. The report goes on to show that the greatest need that we've identified is for general needs properties, and the majority of those are being required in the Barry, Penarth, Llandoch ward areas. In terms of property size, as we know, and I've mentioned at previous scrutiny meetings, the the number of 1 and 2 bedroom homes remain the highest in demand in relation to that 799. The report also reflects on the fact that we've commissioned other reports looking at housing needs, and specifically in relation to older people, and the strategy services at the moment will use the LHMA figures together with a report that we undertook a couple of years ago now, looking at the needs of older persons in the Vale of Morgan, and that strategy report will come to this committee at some stage in the future. The report goes on then in terms of some technical details around why the figures, how the figures are calculated, why the figures are calculated in a specific way. We talk about then also that it's identified that there are some surpluses. We've identified that, for example, there are some surpluses in some areas of 3-bedroom general needs properties. But the fact that we have to net off surpluses as well from those areas where there is need, and because that's not based on bedroom size but just on the basis of numbers of properties, that can mask some of the issues in some of the demographic areas and some of the communities. I think on that point, at 220 of the report, the Welsh Government Guide itself does highlight that the calculation of the figure is more of an art than a science, and I think it's therefore, you know, it is correct that the headline net housing need figure shouldn't be used as a definitive measure of need or as a target figure. The council will never achieve 890 affordable housing units per year over a 5-year period. I don't think that there necessarily would be enough land available for us to build that many houses on. But as I say, it does give you that headline figure in terms of the actual needs that we're identifying. I don't think I'll dwell much longer on the report. The report obviously is attached and is broken down into the more specific detail into wards and districts and areas. It is, I think, an interesting read, and bearing in mind that this report provides the benchmark and evidence base for our options and solutions as we look forward. This is the document that drives our ambition as a local authority to build more council housing at pace and scale. This is the document that we reference with our RSL partners, our housing association partners, to commit them obviously to meeting the needs of residents within the Vale, and quite clearly it's used as a planning aid to assist us then in terms of our statutory duties in terms of the LDP. Now the LDP is due for review I think in 2021, and this evidence base will obviously form part of that review going forward. So as I say, in terms of the report itself, Cabinet we're happy with the report. It's been referred to scrutiny for consideration and discussion. Any matters that arise or any recommendation or observations may need to go back to Cabinet for Cabinet then to formally adopt the report after this meeting. I'm happy to take questions. Alison Clements is on the call with me today. Alison is our Housing Solutions and Support and People Manager. Her team has been involved, was involved in the work around the local housing market assessment, so she may well be able to answer any more technical, detailed questions, granular questions that members may have. But I would also point out that Alison won't be with us much longer, unfortunately. She's been successfully headhunted by Havant Housing Association, will become their new head of housing. So I wish her well in a future career. But we will. I obviously call on you to assist us over the next 5 or 6 days while you're still with us. Any questions?
Councillor Nugent-Finn.
Thank you, Chair. First question to yourself, Mike. The increase for the Homes for You waiting list it does look massive, but is that, would you say that's would that be an average increase? You know, given the time and circumstances and delays in some of the housing stock, etc., etc. Is that a good average figure, or is it higher or lower than you would expect, please, Mike?
Where we are at the moment, I would expect that. In my experience, it is as high as it's ever been. You know, I've worked at the Vel and have been involved in these assessments for many years. It is increasing. It's increasing daily at the moment, and has increased. These figures don't obviously reflect the changes in the housing figure since COVID, for example, and I would reflect that figure is even higher at this time, as people obviously find it extremely difficult to obviously meet their housing needs. So yes, I would say that is a fairly typical figure of where we are. We do update Homes for You on a regular basis. We write to every applicant requesting whether they still wish to remain registered. We carry out that canvass. And that's done on a rolling basis, and people will be removed if obviously they don't respond to those canvasses. But yes, that's a fairly average figure, but it's a figure which is increasing every year.
Thank you, Mike. My second question is to yourself, Alison. First of all, congratulations on moving on to Harvard. That's I don't know, it seems to be a natural progression for local authority workers. We all leave and go and work in a housing association. Must be a pattern there, I don't know why. Supporting people, do you still have, have you still got it split into specialisms of support needs? And have you got an increase really because of, again, all of the obvious circumstances with regards to support? And perhaps you could give us a sort of, not breaching any confidentiality, but perhaps you could give us a typical story of what the increase in demand is on your team. Thanks, Alison.
Okay. Yeah, so the Supported People is now the Housing Support Grant, and it's been kind of maintained by the Welsh Government. There's been a big push to keep that, you know, it's ever increasing needs before COVID. COVID has dramatically ramped that up, as Mike has said. We've seen an increase in complex needs for people. The Supporting People team work very closely with the Housing Solutions team, so, and more so through COVID. Obviously, I oversee both of those teams. And so they're working really hard together because it's not just a housing issue for people, it's generally support they're needing. So, you know, we have seen an increase in that, as we could talk about it later with the homeless prevention strategy, but we are having to house more people in emergency accommodation, and we are directing that housing support to the most vulnerable there. So, you know, we are working very closely together. There's always pressures, you know, so the team are currently reviewing supported some of the contracts that we've got, so looking at recommissioning some of our services. So they're working on that, and obviously some of that will come to yourselves, I guess, later on, whether those decisions, but they do annual needs, you know. So as Mike said, with this, we've looked at the waiting lists, but we also do needs mapping for housing support every year as well. So that helps influence what type of supported accommodation we need. So, and we've used that to kind of look at what we need to develop to respond to COVID. And, you know, it's been the same need for the last few years, but complex needs, people with probation, prison leavers, mental health, and substance misuse, and that, you know, and that's the biggest priority we've got at the moment. So I don't know if that answers your query, or you look at something a bit more specific.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Thanks, Alison. Any increase with veterans?
Oh, sorry. Have you got a few questions, Councillor Nugent-Finn? Or is it just you wanted to clarify that point about veterans?
Yeah, I was just coming back and wanted to thank Alison for the information.
Councillor Bird, you wanted to speak next? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we haven't seen an increase in veterans. We obviously respond to them. You know, they were the priority need, so we do respond, and we work with you know, specialist third sector organisations to support those. So yeah, there hasn't been a massive increase that, you know, that we've experienced at the moment.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nugent-Finn. Councillor Bird, if you wanted to ask your question.
Okay, thanks. Not sure whether it's aimed at Mike or Alison, but whoever answers me, I don't mind. It's a bit of a two-part question. One, Mike, you'll probably remember I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about local lettings. I just wondered how that was going. Are we having to trawl outside the Vale for many or any? And the second part of my question then is, are we, or what do we do with people who want to move in from other counties to the Vale of Glamorgan? You know, it seems we've got a massive waiting list ourselves, but I just wondered how we were looking at the need for that as well.
I'll take both of those. In terms of the local lettings plan, just so I suppose generally so members are aware, the way we develop new housing, or a housing association develops new housing, specifically in the more rural areas, but you know, it is becoming an issue in the major towns as well. But specifically, we adopt what are called local lettings plans. Those local letting plans look to ensure that those properties that are developed are allocated to those in the main to the people in those communities. I've described it previously as an onion ring sort of approach, whereby we move through the rings as we go through the system. So we will work very closely with community councils, with local ward members and with local communities to try and ensure that the properties that are being built are targeted to those local communities. That has worked successfully and does work successfully. There have been occasions, however, which Councillor Bird is referencing, where on the periphery of the local authority boundaries, whether that be to the east or the west, Bridgend and Cardiff, where there have been developments very close to those boundaries, there has been an issue in relation to specifically in relation to developments that have been undertaken there, where the local housing market area is probably, you know, there's no definitive boundary to a local housing market area. They cross boundaries. So what you tend to have is a lot of people, for example, on the Wembo at the Culverhouse Cross area. The issue that we had there was that there were numbers of people from the Ely area and that side of Cardiff who were interested in being considered. Now, under the LLP, we would consider Vale residents first. However, should we exhaust that list, then we would obviously look to expand. We would obviously look to expand in order to occupy properties. I think what that's taught us is that we need to do an awful lot more work, specifically around ensuring that there is that local, very local demand there for housing before we actually develop it. What we don't want to get into a situation is that we're building houses and we're not rehousing people in the Vale that are in housing need. So I think that was a learning point from us in our experience, certainly at Culverhouse Cross, but we had a similar experience, as I say, at Ogmore by Sea as well, where one of the local RSLs was building very close to the border with Bridgend. So I'm not sure if that answers the first question. The second question about our Homes for You policy. Our Homes for You policy does allow people from outside of county to register, but under our priority scheme, people are assessed as bronze band if you're applying from outside of county. If, however, we identify that there is an acute need that needs to be met by an offer of accommodation in the Vale of Glamorgan, we will assess that individual need. So, for example, if you had somebody, for example, in the Vale of Glamorgan who required essential support from somebody that lived in, I don't know, in Merthyr, for example, then we would consider that situation as an individual situation. We would assess the support need. We would take advice from various agencies and professional people with regard to assessing that need, and we might then reassess that from a bronze to a higher band. But everyone that applies from outside of the area is originally a bronze band member, which is the lowest form of priority that we assess, and then we would take each case on an individual basis.
Thank you, Mike. Second part of my question answered beautifully. Thank you, fully understand that. First part, I just wanted to try and get a feel as to, I know we had a couple of issues in the early days and I haven't heard of any since, but have we had to let to out of county or low cost home ownership sales to out of county at all since those original issues, or is the uptake 100% from the Vale these days?
I personally don't know off the top of my head. Alison may know if we've we have what's called Aspire to Own, which is our scheme for looking at people to be considered for certainly low cost of ownership. I've not been made aware, and I have asked to be made aware because of the situation at both sites at Ogmore by Sea and at Culver House, that I'd be made aware if that situation arose. I'm not aware, but Alison may be able to.
Yeah, I'm not aware. I'd have to go back to the team to, I can double check that, but no, I'm not aware. We go, as Mike says, we go through the local lettings policy, and and it's the local area and then down. So it's yeah.
Okay, great.
I can check that though.
That is really good news if we're letting them all in county, because I was getting worried. I mean, Wenville Ward has had probably more, certainly more low cost home ownership packages and affordable houses built in the last few years, and I was just starting to get a bit twitchy. Well, are we building these for other counties? And I felt a little bit. It just didn't seem to sit right with me. I know people from other counties have needs, but I really felt strongly that it was for our residents the greatest need, and if we're not having to go out to county, that is fantastic news as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any more questions for Mike or Alison on this report? Are we happy to? We've considered this report. We're happy to accept it so that it goes back to cabinet. Is everyone happy with that? Thank you very much. Thank you, Alison, and good luck in your new job. And thank you, Mike. And the next agenda item is agenda item 5, Safer Vale Partnership Strategy 2020 to 2023. That went to cabinet on 19th of October, and we have Debbie Gibbs, the Principal Community Safety Officer, to present this for us. I can't hear you, Debbie.
I'm unmuted now. I didn't know, Mike, if you wanted to start, or are you happy for me to carry on? Okay, so thank you for having. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for the invite to come to the meeting this evening to present to you the Safer Vale strategy. It did go to Cabinet on Monday the 19th and has come to scrutiny this evening for your consideration. Just to recap, the Safer Vale Partnership, the Council is the statutory member, along with Police, Health, Probation and the Fire and Rescue Service. So it's a long-standing partnership that we have got in the Vale of Glamorgan, and obviously it was introduced back in 1998 through the Crime and Disorder Act, and over those years the partnership has really evolved. Certainly in my time it's changed direction. We've looked at new things. There's been more emphasis on certain elements going forward. And last year, the strategic partnership, which is currently chaired by Miles Penter, really wanted to focus on the work of community safety and to really drive that forward for the Vale of Glamorgan area. So the strategic partnership agreed that we would implement a standalone strategy, because prior to that it had been very much involved in the Public Service Board and the community strategy, but they wanted to have that emphasis purely on community safety. So we started work on the strategy some time ago now, and it started with a strategic assessment. And just so that you're aware what a strategic assessment is that we take data from all our partner agencies that are sort of crime and disorder related, and we sort of bring that all together to try and highlight where the priorities are, where there's spikes, where things have reduced, so that we can really understand what is happening in the Vale of Glamorgan. So this assessment was done, and I have to say it didn't really give us any shocks about what was happening in the Vale as such, but it did sort of confirm what we were already aware of, which in a way was quite good, because we were already working on a lot of the priorities that were coming out. We will relook at the strategic assessment every year and refresh that data just to monitor sort of progress, what's happening, and if there's any spikes or anything like that, just so that we stay on top of what is happening. As part of the development, we actually look to have some wider consultation with staff members, with community members, and I know Neighbourhood Watch was a key contributor to the strategy because of the work that they do in our communities. So we took into account what staff was telling us, some of the resident surveys that we had done on social media, and to try and get more of the flavour of what our communities were telling us and what they wanted to see as well. So what actually happened from that is that the partnership were able to gain quite a lot of information, and the one key thing that our community was telling us was that they didn't really understand what Safer Vale was, what it was there to do, and what our responsibilities were. They kept referring it to council, police and things like that, and it is far more than that. It is very much a joined up approach. So it was those types of things that was quite helpful coming back from the community members, sort of to guide us really on what we needed to improve on and to develop. One of the other things that came from staff members was that they felt that there wasn't that sort of operational information sharing in place that was quick enough sometimes, and that if certain teams were doing something, that wasn't always shared at an appropriate time really with the wider departments, like, you know, within the local authority. So there was key things really for the partnership to learn from that. So we took all of that information, we pulled it all together, and we sort of developed the strategy. And one of the key things that you'll notice from the strategy is that some members who are quite familiar with the work of Safer Vale would sort of recognise that we used to deal with things from antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse, those types of headings, and what we wanted to do was to try and move away from sort of stereotyping issues, because we're all familiar with the fact that a lot of the issues occur and they don't occur with other issues, and it was trying not to put a badge on people or issues in our community, and we needed to widen out those priorities that it could involve a range of issues. So you'll notice that our priorities have changed from what you'll be used to, and the key headings are around the prevent and reduce. So the partnership will work to prevent and reduce crime and antisocial behaviour to keep people who live, work and visit in the Vale safe and free from the fear of crime. The second one was around engagement. The partnership will improve the way it connects with, involves and informs the community to increase awareness, the feeling of belonging and positive community cohesion in the Vale. Thirdly, it was around safeguarding, and the partnership will work to safeguard the most vulnerable in the community. And lastly, it was about working together, and this was around the partnership being committed to strengthening partnership working to improve efficiencies and problem solving. So quite a change really in our objectives and what we've currently looked at in previous years gone by. So we spent a long time developing these in partnership working with our partner agencies, and we developed the strategy which you've got. I don't intend to go through all of the strategy because it's quite a chunky document, but in response to some of the community feedback that we had, we did develop a community facing Safer Vale strategy that was a lot easier to read and a lot quicker. A lot of people come back and said that they didn't like to read like a 60-page document. They just wanted to know the facts. So we were quite conscious that of having two available for people depending on what they wanted to see. Obviously this was developed last year in preparation to go live earlier this year because it started from April. But obviously due to COVID we had to delay so some of the work around it or it being formally adopted. The strategy has been adopted by our partner agencies up until this date, but due to COVID we didn't want to stop progress because there were key things that needed to change and needed to update. And I think one positive thing, if I can say that, from COVID is that it did push and has improved partnership working in amongst that we've had to get on and solve problems. We've had to sort of look at barriers and quickly adapt to new ways of working to drive the improvements because we were under quite a lot of pressure at the beginning within lockdown on community safety activity. So we've got this strategy, we've got the action plan, we've got a newly formed operational group which is formed to drive progress. I co-chair that operational group with a police colleague so that we can monitor progress. We've got the strategic group which still is chaired by Miles Punter from head of the Director of Visibles and Environmental Services. So I don't know if anybody would like me to go through some of the key things that we have been able to deliver even through lockdown. I don't know if that would be helpful to partners.
Would people like to hear the key areas that they've managed to continue to work on through COVID? Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
So under prevent and reduce crime and disorder, one of the positive things that we've been able to do is that we have had to adapt very quickly to spikes in antisocial behaviour. This was one of the main issue for community safety was the increase in especially around youth gathering in parks and things like that. So one of the things we were able to do was we as a local authority purchased some deployable CCTV cameras and we've deployed them in our main antisocial behaviour hotspots, and we've been able to identify some of the people that have been causing that antisocial behaviour, which has been really positive and you know good for those communities as well, because we did see a reduction in the antisocial behaviour. Having said that, where people have continued to cause ASB, we have been in a position to look at the ASB process for them and take action where appropriate. Under the engage priority, this was one of the really disappointing things for the team, because as you know, annually we do a lot of engagement over the summer months. We do the walk a mile in her shoes, we do the Safer Vale Fun Day, and we do a lot of activity really over the summer months, and the team were quite disappointed that for obvious reasons we weren't able to do that this year. But it was a key thing for us to still stay engaged with our communities. So we've done quite a lot of work with Neighbourhood Watch and Airport Watch and Paws on Patrol and Rural Watch to try and stay connected with our communities. And one of the things we've been able to do is actually transfer some of their details onto our Vale Connect system within the local authority, so that we can still get messages out to them earlier than what we could have done before. So it's been quite challenging, because I think there's been over 1,000 residents we've been able to transfer onto this system to try and get information out to them. On top of that, we've provided support around the use of Zoom. So we've been working with some of our residents to sort of upskill them as best we can remotely to use some of these new IT solutions that we've got. And so we'll continue to do what we can. However, obviously it is quite difficult not being able to do what we would have done in a normal year. Under the safeguard heading, this has seen quite a lot of movement over the last six months. The biggest thing was the MARIC meetings that we hold for high-risk victims. We've now moved to a different model of discussing these in a multi-agency arena. We now hold twice weekly discussions, which allows agencies to come together on a Monday and a Friday to discuss our high-risk victims. Before that, it would be every fortnight. There would be this formal MARIC process, which could on some occasions take 6-7 hours to hold one meeting, which was quite draining for staff members to actually sit there for that length of time and discuss quite distressing cases sometimes. And we were quite keen to improve this arena, so that if we identified somebody on a Wednesday that was high risk, that case would be formally discussed in that multi-agency arena on that Friday, so that plans could be put in place for that weekend. So that's actually been in place since September, and it is working really, really well at the moment. So we've had really good feedback for some victims, and also our staff are telling us that this is a much better way at managing and having those conversations about people that are most vulnerable. In addition to that, we now have an IDVA, which is an independent domestic violence advisor, actually based within a community safety team, so that the discussions can happen a lot more sooner than relying on phone calls, emails. This is to sort of tie the loop up with police officers and people that coordinate MARIC, the links between ASB, so that we can really start to information share more quickly and more effectively, and look at possible problem solving opportunities. And this has also had a really positive step to resolving and supporting people far sooner. The other development is around the Drive project, which is a pilot project for the Vale, which went live in September, which is working with perpetrators of domestic violence as well. This is currently funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner for 1 year, and they are going to work with around 30 perpetrators in the Vale, which are our high-risk perpetrators. And the idea is that we try to support them to change, or that we look at what they call disruption tactics, so that we can try and ensure that we take enforcement action far sooner than what we have done previously. And that is having a really positive impact. And lastly, the work together. As I've said, COVID has really pushed agencies to work far more closely than what I've ever seen in community safety. it has been especially busy for us and quite challenging. And I think one of the really good things that have come is that we are being a lot more creative now in our problem solving, and we are able to respond far quicker than what we did previously. And I think that's as a result of sort of not having a lot of time to look at things, because of the reports that were coming in were quite high at the beginning of lockdown. So in a way, it's sort of cemented partnership relationships, and there's more of an acceptance of what we can and can't do. For example, I'm more involved with visible services now in looking at our parks and open spaces for the antisocial behaviour, and we're looking at more joint things of what we can do internally as well as externally, which did happen beforehand, but I think because of the volume that we were experiencing, it has sort of pulled us together a lot more. So that's been quite positive. So I think that's just a quite quick snapshot really of some of the work that we have been doing, even though the strategy hasn't been sort of formally signed off. We you know, I'm quite conscious that we were still working towards some of the actions. And I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Deborah Gibbs? Councillor Sally Hanks.
Thank you, Chair. Debbie, can I just ask you, on page 52 of the report, you've got children receiving care with substance misuse. The Vale of Glamorgan came out as being the highest. Is there any reason for that? It seems unusual that it would be higher in the Vale. We've got Cardiff, Newport and other authorities. I can't quite see if we're improving or not, because they both look rather dark, the charts, so I can't see if it's getting better, but they're still very high. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have is that this data is from 2017 to 18, so that position may have changed. I'm quite happy to try and source from our area planning board colleagues if there has been a switch in that. There's quite a development at the moment with data from the area planning board to try and progress this, because it's making sure that across the board we all collect data in the same way, which sometimes skews those figures. So it is something that was picked up in the strategic assessment, and we are actively working with the area planning board to address some of these sort of issues, so that we can fully justify them, or to check what the differences would be that are, you know, making our area look higher than others.
Okay,
but I can't figures for you, because you know,
yeah,
at the time of writing this, we worked from that data at that particular time, and it's one of those things when you write a strategy that the data is only as good as the data at that time, that you know, things change so quickly sometimes.
Okay, if we could have an update on that at some point, it would be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that if you perhaps get the figures and can forward it to Mark, if
Yep.
that would be good for the committee to have a look at those. If you want to forward it to us, then Mark. Heather Smith, did you have a question as well?
I was just, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. I was just like to ask Debbie, have you come across self-harming? We're having, in our area, we've got children that are self-harming, and we've had a group before COVID came down, and they were discussing about children going through these psychological things, and they were all self-harming. I didn't realise it was as big in Barry. You know, I realised it was more vast than it was. Have you come across it yet?
It's one of the things that we work closely with our partners in health, and also youth offending team and the youth service. We have seen an increase in young people misusing substances, alcohol and drugs, especially over lockdown. My team don't directly manage or deal with young people that have self-harmed, but if you would like further information, I can talk to our partners in health to get you that information.
I'd like to have a look, if you could, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does Anybody else have any questions for Debbie Gibbs? Oh, so Mike Ingram, if you wanted to speak or ask a question.
Yeah. Just to provide a little bit of sort of reference about those points about the individual actions. The governance arrangements for the Safer Vale strategic group is obviously we report to the PSB. So in terms of
That's my clock.
Oh, if people are able to mute themselves when they're not speaking, that would be lovely. Thank you.
So in terms of governance, the sort of PSB actually will sign off or do sign off, obviously, the strategic document. It's not a Vale of Glamorgan Council strategic document, it is a partners document. And what's happened is that this document has also been shared, obviously, with the other statutory agencies. And as far as I'm aware, that those agencies have already adopted the strategy. As I say, it came to the council a little bit later than perhaps some of our statutory partners. Would it be worth, whilst there is no recommendation clearly there for you to have oversight of the action plan, would members, for example, want to see a regular update on the action plan for information and comment going forward? As I say, ordinarily the strategic group will report to the PSB, but as I say, it may be of interest because the factors that are obviously in the action plan affect all of your communities. And you may wish to, and I think the other thing to point out is the action plan, whilst it relates, the original strategy, sorry, relates to information set in 2017, clearly it's a living document, so that action plan will evolve, taking into account the issues that we've had to that we've dealt with over the last 8 or 9 months, and there may be other priorities that will need to be added. As we'll mention from the homeless prevention report next, it's a living document. We will add further priorities, but I just wondered whether that might be something that members would like.
Is that the document that comes after page 64 of the closing remarks, the one where there's the date and the time, the various actions that need doing, and then the date that it needs to be done by? Is that the document that you're talking about, Mike?
Yes, it is. There will be actions that are related to the Vale of Glamorgan Council. There will be same actions related to other partners. There will be other actions that other partners will take forward, like the police or the fire service. But as I say, I think it probably is important because they're cross-cutting themes, aren't they? They aren't just housing issues, or these are community safety issues, which you will all probably want an update on, I think, to understand what's going on as this strategy develops and the action plan develops.
Okay, and how often would the action plan, the updates happen? Would it be sort of a quarterly basis, as we do with other things, Mike, with other sort of targets that people have, the RAG system?
I would think where we are at the moment, and the way that we're meeting half yearly would probably be more relevant at this stage, because I don't think there will be some of the actions there that aren't moving forward as quickly at the moment, because we are prioritising other areas of activity. As Deb mentioned, we spent an awful lot of time during the summer dealing with ASB. We know, for example, that the next phase of training for domestic abuse, domestic violence, the VAUDA SV training is due to be rolled out in the not too distant future. So we will concentrate on that then for another period. So I think probably 6 months is possibly something that I would recommend.
Okay, our committee happy for that to happen if we put that down as a recommendation, that we get a report every 6 months on the action plan to see how it's progressing? Yes, so that can go down as one of other recommendations. the only question that I had for you, Debbie, was the drive project. Is the Vale Council delivering that, or is somebody else delivering the drive project?
No, it's a third sector organisation that is delivering that, and it has been tried in other areas and been very successful. So we were due to go live back in April, May time, so it was delayed because of recruitment issues. So it actually went live in September, and we are starting to see some success already with some of the cases.
I don't know whether the committee would be interested in finding out a little bit more about the drive project, perhaps whether we'd be able to sort of have a small presentation on that at a later date, or whether that would be something that we would be interested in. And I think just anecdotally, it would be interesting to know what sort of success rate that the drive project actually has. Well, I don't know what other people think. Would it be something you'd be interested in, or we can come back to that another day, perhaps?
I have, if you would like to say for formal presentation, I have got a presentation that Drive has produced that would highlight some of that information that you want. So I'm happy, and I am able to share that with you. That could just be emailed around to people, and then you can make an informed decision based on that if it answers your questions.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Would people be happy with that? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we've considered the document now. We're happy with the strategy and everything. The one recommendation that we've come from this committee is that we get a 6-monthly report on the action plan to see how we're getting along. But we're happy for this to go back to Cabinet for them to take on board, to endorse. Is that okay? Yes. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Debbie. If you haven't got anything else now, if you wanted to leave, you're more than welcome to. Thank you for the presentation.
Okay, thanks. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
So, the final agenda, well, final report is the number 6, the Homelessness Prevention Strategy 2018 to 2022 monitoring report. Alison, Clement and Mike are going to be talking about that.
Yes, I'll start.
Okay.
I'll start, Chair. A slightly delayed report, obviously, again, under the circumstances. This report has been, the strategy and action plan have been considered by this committee previously, and you'd had one previous report, I think, in terms of an update. We had originally, as I say, planned to bring this to you in March. I think what's important to acknowledge, and we refer to in the report, is what's been going on clearly for the last 6 months. And I know we, in the report, have provided some information in terms of some of the activity, which I think would probably be of interest. The Housing Solutions Service and our Supporting People Service have been under tremendous pressure, as you are aware. Certainly over the last 6 and 7 months. During that period of time, we've received over 2,300 homelessness inquiries for advice and support. We had at the time 86 units of B&B accommodation at the time of writing of the report. That's now in excess of 100 units because the numbers continue to increase. So those are people that come to us indicating that they're homeless or street homeless, and under the revised legislation we have a requirement at this time to provide emergency accommodation. During that time there has been some transition and some move on. So during that period we placed 269 households in B&B, but as I say, we've got 100 or so units at the moment. So people have moved through the system. They've either moved into alternative forms of temporary accommodation. A significant number, I think it's fair to say, have left the accommodation and have found their own solutions, whatever they may be. Others, for a variety of reasons, will have given up accommodation, and for a small proportion, we will have taken fairly drastic action where there may have been damage to accommodation or significant antisocial behaviour. We've had no alternative but to ask those people to leave the accommodation. However, despite those challenges, we've continued to work on the actions in the Homeless Prevention Action Plan, which is attached to the report. Just a little bit of background, we're required obviously to have a strategy based on Section 50 of the Housing Wales Act. That strategy requires us, in partnership with others, to prevent homelessness, to look at the availability of suitable accommodation, provide support and assistance. What we identified in the strategy and action plan was we're required to deliver certain outcomes as well for those in the vulnerable groups, which are highlighted under 1.4 of the report. I've mentioned the issues that we've been dealing with more recently, but some of the keynote sort of things that we're looking at the moment. The report out of the door, which was LGBTQ Youth Homelessness in Wales report, has been adopted by us as a department, and was formally, has been formally acknowledged as best practice by the National Support for People Network and the Homelessness Network and Ending Youth Homelessness Board. We've appointed a LGBTQ+ champion within the service, and we're in the process, or we have arranged training across the director, across housing and building services, and we're liaising at the moment with Stonewall, who will provide that training to arrange suitable dates in the coming weeks. We've identified new actions in the action plan as well in relation to recovery from the first phase of our response to homelessness and COVID, and there is a report due to go to Cabinet on the 16th of November, which will highlight in detail some of the work that we're doing under phase 2. But that's included also now within our action plan, and the provision of temporary housing as a result of that. I've mentioned we've had to increase our hotel provision, and we're now in a position where we're block booking that hotel provision forward now to the end of March, in discussion with Welsh Government. So at least we've got a guaranteed source of accommodation, certainly to the end of March. We've got guaranteed funding to the end of March. What I would presume Welsh Government after March will consider extending that funding, because I can't see how we will be moving 100+ people, the majority of which are single people, moving those people into alternative accommodation in that time frame. We also know that, for example, some of our activity has been around private sector housing. Members will be aware that obviously there was the bar in terms of initially issuing notices and evictions, and that was in place until September. And clearly one of our concerns going forward is, even though landlords are now required to issue 6 months notice under the Section 21 provision, rather than the previous 3 months, I think it was, it's now 6 months, and as a result of which we're working closely with private sector landlords, trying to save as many tenancies as we possibly can within that 6-month period, which is obviously very welcome. We've also, for those members who are on social media and other forms, Facebook and other forms of social media, we're working very hard at the moment with our comms team in the council to provide further promotional information and initiatives, and also undertaking private rented landlord survey, which effectively enables us to understand how many private landlords are having issues with their tenants, and more importantly, making sure we have a communication route with those landlords. As I say, perhaps there may be initiatives, spend to save initiatives that we can adopt with those landlords to save and prevent homelessness in those instances. I won't go through the action plan. Obviously, there's lots of actions still open. We're obviously continuing to deal with our high-level actions, but some of those other actions, the lower medium actions, we've obviously had to park for a little while. But as I say, hopefully you'll find the report informative, and the action plan updates you in terms of our response to the strategy.
Does anyone have any questions? Or Bethan Hunt?
Hi there. Yeah, I just wanted to introduce, we do have a private rented sector debt helpline as well at Citizens Advice at the moment. So if you do know anybody who is in the private rented sector who are struggling for the first time in rent arrears due to the coronavirus, even if they aren't necessarily in debt arrears at the moment, rent arrears at the moment, but they are for the first time ever that they're realizing that they are going to be in financial difficulty. We do have a telephone number now that will help those private rented sector clients as well. So even if you don't have any rent arrears just yet, but you are worried about, or if you do have rent arrears, we're here on hand with specialist caseworkers as well to help out. And of course, there's information about the tenancy saver loan and any other debt options for clients as well. So I just wanted to sort of, sorry to jump in, Mike, but just to sort of say that that we do have some help at the moment on our side, which is certainly helping with the eviction and preventing people from becoming homeless, of course.
Okay, thank you, Bethan.
Thank you.
Alison, did you want to add anything about the report? Was there anything that you wanted to say?
No, it's just to echo kind of what Mike has said. You know, we're continuing to progress the actions in an incredibly busy 7 months focusing on COVID. That's had to take the priority, and we've been, we've had to respond. And as Deb had said before, we've seen it. We always worked with other agencies anyway, but we've had, we're working much more closely with other agencies, with other partners in the local authority. One of the requirements from Welsh Government was to set up a central coordination cell for local authorities, and we set that up, and that was meeting weekly. It's now fortnightly, and Pam Toms chairs that, and I support it. But that has probation, health, community safety, our RSL partners. We have social services on there, and we're discussing homelessness and housing issues every 2 weeks with those groups, and it's been incredibly stressful and dealing with it. But the fact that we build in those links with multi agencies, we've got support providers on there as well. So we've got Pobble, that we launched the one-stop shop earlier this year, funded through Housing Support Grant, and that's been phenomenal how they've managed to deliver that service remotely. So the people we've got in the hotels, they're up there doing weekly weekly drop-ins. We've had substance misuse services in there. So although it's been incredibly challenging, we've worked really well together and we've responded to need, and we haven't had a massive issue. Other local authorities have waiting lists for emergency accommodation. We don't. We're responding, we're dealing with it. We're not, we're picking people up, and then we're working, as Mike said, incredibly hard to move on. We've been, with my other side of my area, the housing strategy, we've been fortunate because we do have a healthy development programme, and we've had a few big schemes opening through COVID. We've got one this week with Goodshed, the Junction House, 24 unit accommodation. The people will be signing up at the end of this week, moving in on Monday, and that's taking people from temporary accommodation. And so that releases some pressure as well. But as Mike says, we're getting approximately 8 people a week needing to be housed in emergency accommodation. So, we just need to continue to respond to that. So that's all I was going to add, really.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody have any questions for Mike or Alison on this? No? Oh, it's Councillor Sally Hanks.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to comment that I see in the operational delivery update plan on page 6, the recent forum was attended by 55 landlords. Would that be a pleasing number, and is that something that's increasing? To me, it looked like that was going in the right direction.
Do you want me to respond, Mike?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so we do have a very good relationship with private landlords, and we've got an officer in the team who focuses on that and is working with landlords and trying to increase the supply that we have, because that, one of the key ways for us to rehouse people and to move people on is within the private rented sector. Social housing is not going to meet everybody's needs, or so we do have that, and that is very healthy. And we have Howard and the team has been going out and helping other forums and other local authority areas. We are one of, we have a very strong forum, and other local authorities have been learning from Howard how to develop that and build those relationships. And when COVID happened and we had to look at ways of increasing the supply we already had those links already, although Welsh Government were providing support, and they would share, they did a call out for landlords if people wanted their properties to be, considered for rented and for us to work with them. We already had those relationships anyway, so I think that's a real positive that we've got those relationships.
Oh, excellent! Well done.
Thank you. I suppose the only bit that perhaps I would like to just talk about really is because obviously you've been firefighting since March, and the the operational delivery update plan appendix 1 with the RAG system there, where you've had to put things on the back burner and things like that. Is there an idea of when you may be able to move forward with the ones that are so that they go from amber, red to green? Is there any idea around how you can move forward with that, even though you're still firefighting, if you like, as well?
I think it is a challenge at the moment. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Our staff, our housing solutions team, are almost entirely focused on reactive at the moment, just because of the numbers. From the coordination cell meetings, we're aware, for example, that there are additional numbers coming down the line. So, for example, we know in advance now when prison leavers are coming through the system. So we know, for example, that will become an issue over the coming 3 or 4 weeks, in that we know that there are some Vale prisoners who will be leaving prison shortly. And we will have duties then to provide accommodation. So we're still dealing with the day-to-day challenges, to be perfectly honest. The only point I'd make with the action plan with some of the lower priority is that some of those things were low priority anyway and won't be delivered this year. They would be delivered next year or the year after, within the year of the plan. But I think I take on board your point. I think what we will do, and what I will ask the team to do, is to go through the action plan and to show you the ones that are actually parked, so at least you can see. And then obviously when we bring further reports, I can show you when they become unparked, for a better word, and where things are moving forward. But I think we will be spending certainly the later half of this financial year. We will be looking at an awful lot of our phase 2 recovery planning. We've mentioned potentially looking at other areas that we need to look at as part of a potential task and finish activity for Homes and Safe. So there will be reports and things going on there around how do we allocate our properties. Are there other things that we can do, perhaps in, are we going to under-occupy our properties, and the impact of under-occupying properties to move people out of the bed and breakfast and into more suitable accommodation. I think we have to understand that bed and breakfast is, as an emergency provision, it was given the fact that the airport was shut and travel and restrictions on travel, that created the opportunity with the B&B. At some stage, that position is going to change. All of us have got our fingers crossed. Hopefully, that position is going to change, and that will put additional pressure on us then to move people on more quickly. The bed and breakfast is not, it isn't a home. And I think my concern will be that there are people that have been in our B&B, some of them since April, and we haven't moved those people on at the moment. There will be people who, for example, whilst they are receiving remote and some face-to-face specialised support, bed and breakfast again isn't suitable for some of those situations. So I think we will continue to move forward. There will be new actions that will arrive on that agenda, and we'll make members aware of those as those new actions occur. We'll show you the ones that are part, and we'll show you the ones that are ongoing then with regular updates. And I think then it becomes a more useful document perhaps for you to reference.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And I think perhaps, I know we briefly talked about a task and finish group around this sort of subject at the last meeting, and perhaps it is something that we could come to in the new year. Might be something that worth trying to set up then, if people would be interested in looking around the homelessness, under occupation, the governance of it, and things like that. And perhaps that's something we can come back to in January, February, if we could note that. Are people happy to then sort of talk about a task and finish group at that stage? Yes? Yes, okay. Would that be okay, Mark, if you could do that? So if you could thank the staff for their hard work that they've undertaken over the last 6 months in working with the people who are homeless and everything like that. The committee would really like to thank everybody. The staff, been incredible what you have actually achieved. And are we happy to note this report? And I expect we'll have updates on it at a later date. Yes. Okay. Thank you both. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Mike. Okay. So I haven't got any urgent business, and part 2, there isn't anything on part 2. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about, Mark?
No, nothing from me, Chair. No.
Okay, so that concludes this meeting. Thank you everybody for attending and participating, and we'll see you in December. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. I'll close down the webinar for everyone else now, so it will just come out. Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you all.